Okay, right. I'll kick off then. So thanks for that, the introduction, Jemima. And yeah, my name's Alan Millar. I'm the Rural Community Energy Fund Officer for the North East Yorkshire Humber Energy Hub. So I'm employed by Tees Valley, which is why it's got Tees Valley on the front slide there. But really, my work is based in the North East Yorkshire Humber area. So the Energy Hub works together with the 6 legs in that area effectively. So that's the patch for the organisation. And like I say, I'm obviously involved in community energy. So moving on, in terms of what is community energy, I don't know whether it's a phrase that will sound familiar to you all or not. It's a kind of established. It's an established group, an established mechanism, if you like, of delivering projects. But really, what it is very simply, it's where communities own renewable energy assets. Simple as that. It can come in all sorts of different shapes and stripes, but basically it's where communities own an energy generating asset. And the 2 pictures here give you a couple of ideas of what's been done in the past. So if you go back 10 years, wind turbines were quite a popular means of generation for community energy groups. Really, when the movement started growing, let's say 10 years or so back, wind turbines was the main driver for the sector to be growing. Planning restrictions became tougher, and then the sector moved on. Government supported solar panels with the feed-in tariff scheme. So then really the most common project was putting solar panels, particularly on schools. So a lot of community energy groups started off with projects based on panels on schools, and the model there would be the community energy group owned panels. The school would pay a reduced price for their electricity. They might pay 11 pence a unit instead of 14 pence a unit. That money is paid to the community group. The community group have an income stream, and they use that income stream to borrow money to pay for the panels. So that's been a very common business model for community energy groups. Not the only model by any means, but certainly a common model. Now we've moved on, we're looking at different models. Obviously the feed-in tariff is no more for new projects. And really there's been a move towards looking at probably more ambitious projects, looking at ranges of buildings, looking at ranges of technological solutions, which I'll go into in a little bit more detail. So that's in a nutshell community energy. Next question, what is the Rural Community Energy Fund? A couple of maps here on this slide. And really this is just to show you why, like I say, I don't know whether you're familiar with community energy, that term, or not. But really what this shows you is the slide to the left showing activity in the south of England, where there's a lot of successful community energy groups have been established, and to the right, unfortunately, much less activity in our neck of the woods. So there's not a huge number of projects that have been delivered in our region, but that's not because it's not possible. You know, we work under the same funding regime as they do in the south, and there's been a lot of projects delivered in the south. So in terms of what is the Rural Community Energy Fund, like I say, in the slides we'll go into a little bit of detail on the kind of technicalities of the fund. But on the bigger picture, the reason that we have the Community Energy Fund, is because we're trying to support projects. Now the projects themselves, we see they should be self-financing. So either they should generate savings, and those savings can be used to pay for the asset, or they generate income. So they generate electricity that can be sold to a building or an organisation, and that creates an income stream, which can be used to borrow money to pay for the asset. So the idea is that the projects themselves stand alone. There should be as a business model, they should stand alone. However, obviously there's a need to do exploratory work to find out whether projects are feasible or not, and that is where the Rural Community Energy Fund comes in. It's a fund, it's a pot of money to be accessed to do that feasibility work, to work out whether there's a project that's viable as a standalone project to deliver. So that's really the key. That's where the RCEF comes in, and it's where government have identified. Obviously, there was a lot of community energy activity 4 or 5 years ago with the feed-in tariff. It then dropped off. It tailed off as the feed-in tariff dropped away, and now this is government seeing an opportunity to support new projects coming through. So just in terms of the nuts and bolts of the fund, we're looking at a little bit more detail. So in terms of eligibility, and what is eligible to bid into the fund, projects should be in rural areas. So we use the DEFRA magic map to check what's designated as rural and what's designated as urban. But the general rule of thumb is if your population's under 10,000, that's an area which is likely to apply, likely to be eligible, sorry. The fund is open to a wide range of community groups, parish councils, local charities, churches, a range of different groups. Around 50% of our bids that we've received to date are from parish councils. The other 50% are really from quite a wide range of different types of organisation, but all community groups with community aims at their core. Projects are designed for, so the fund is designed to support projects of scale. So again, that's really about looking at projects that are relatively ambitious, I would say, covering a range of buildings. So we're looking at projects that don't just focus on a single building. That's a very specific criteria that government's insisted on. It's not to look at single buildings. Again, the solar panel model is that's tried and tested. So the aim of this fund is to try and look more widely than that, and look at projects involving multiple buildings, and also the other stipulation there, significant pre-planning development. So again, this is suggesting projects of scale. And the fund covers a wide range of technologies. So again, solar, wind, hydro, biomass, anaerobic digestion, where food waste can be taken and broken down, and that can be used to generate energy. So we've had a couple of anaerobic digestion projects that we've supported recently. In terms of how are the projects paid for, so again, just to be absolutely clear, the role of the RCEF is to pay for the feasibility costs, not the capital costs. So it's to do all generally the bids that we receive can be split down into 3 headings. Normally there's a major chunk of the cost of the grant required for consultants' costs. There might be a much smaller requirement for project management costs, and then there might be another small amount for administrative costs. So community events, hires of hall and such like, obviously trickier to do at the moment, but that's generally how the bids that we receive are broken down. So like I say, capital costs can't be covered, and the idea is that the asset is paid for through either an income stream that's generated through sale of energy that's created, or savings that are generated that can be used to pay for an asset. The third bullet point there, I've said there's an opportunity for fundraising to pay for assets, but really that's not what community energy is about. It's not expected that people are just going out to raise money to pay for these assets. It's expected that there's a business model there, that they're viable on their own, they stand on their own 2 feet effectively as projects. Okay, and in terms of the bidding process itself, it's a 2-stage fund. So the first stage that we have, it says there, is for up to £40,000 to support feasibility work. Now the bidding process itself isn't hugely onerous. There's an application form. It's around 12 pages long. It asks obviously for a level of information, but the process itself isn't hugely onerous. But the first stage, up to £40,000 can be secured to do the feasibility study into what technologies might work in a project. That would take the project up to business case. So at the end of that feasibility, you'd expect to have a set of numbers showing how this project worked, making clear suggestions about how it might be paid for. You'd expect to have consultation with planners to see whether there's any planning issues, any issues about, it depends on the type of project, but potentially building regs, such like. So those are the things you would expect to be covered by feasibility. If a stage 1 bid shows a project to be viable, it shows that there's a really strong business case for this project to be delivered, a project can then bid in for stage 2 funding. Now that is to cover costs relating to basically all costs between feasibility and site start. So if, for example, it was a hydro project that was like a bespoke building, you might need an engineer to develop sets of working drawings in order to tender that piece of work. There might be some issues around ground contamination, so there might need to be site investigations done. There'd be costs against that. There might be specific planning issues that required other kind of surveys, wildlife surveys. So all of these costs, all the upfront costs, the stage 2 fund can be used for. The fund has been open for 2 years in total, but it runs until October next year. But at the moment, our final bid date is the 1st of May next year. We might be able to squeeze in a final bidding round if there's still funds available. But as things stand, 1st of May is our final bidding date. And we've got rolling deadlines, so every 2 to 3 months there's a deadline for bids to be received. So at the moment, our next bidding rounds closes on the 1st of November, and then 1st of February there's another bidding round, and then let's say 1st of May is the last one that's open at the moment. So in terms of what we look for in a bid, I say the first point is probably the most important of all. It's about groups being committed. It's not an easy undertaking to deliver a community energy project. We're setting up a meeting. We've supported around 20 projects to date, and we're going to set up an event where we get those 20 together, and we've got a couple of groups who've actually gone through this process to present to them, to explain some of the pitfalls and some of the lessons that they learned through going through their project delivery. And the message that I get when I talk to these groups is it's not easy, but it's massively rewarding. So that's I think that's absolutely key, is that it's not, these projects aren't straightforward to unpick. So a degree of commitment is absolutely essential. Other things we look for: a range of skills in a group. Obviously, the group would be responsible for spending up to £40,000 and getting what they needed for that money. So showing that the group has the skills to do that. That people don't need to be engineers, they don't need to have done community energy projects in the past, but we look for a range of skills that can be used to deliver this kind of work. We look for clarity on how the project is going to be managed. We would look for some information on how the community had been consulted with and whether there was a level of buy-in. Basically, was there some commitment beyond the group themselves into delivering such a project? Obviously, what that means exactly differs between projects. Obviously, every project's different, every group's different, but we look for, let's say, a level of community buy-in to the project. We would expect that the benefits of a project are kept locally, so that's something we asked for some clarification on through the application process, and also a clear tender process. So obviously, the group's responsible for those funds. They can tender that work, and we just look for clarity to ensure that value for money is being secured, and how is that tender process being followed. I should add at this point as well that the Energy Hub actually has a framework partner for the RCEF fund as well. So we ourselves have gone through a tender process, and we selected a consultant, called Locogen. And to us, we felt that they had the best experience in delivering these types of projects. And what Locogen do, firstly, they offer some free advice to groups. So if groups have got some ideas and they want to run them past an engineer, Locogen can do that. They do a consultation at no cost. And the other thing that they can do is, if groups don't want to go down the tender process, if that's something that they're not confident doing, or if they like what they see from Locogen through a free consultation, they can appoint them directly without going through a tender process, because we've gone through that tender process for on behalf of the groups, effectively. But let's say, from our point of view, it's just an option. No groups are under any obligation to use that group. We have no benefit in that at all. But we've put them. We went through that tender process really mostly in order to deliver some advice to groups at that really crucial, very early stage, when groups might have some ideas and might think, actually, we've really got no idea whether these are feasible at all, and what we can do. Let's say, because of Locogen's involvement, we get some free advice from them, so they can take an initial look and make some suggestions of what's the most likely successful project to look at. Okay, so in terms of projects supported to date, let's say it's 21 projects we've supported, 20 stage 1 projects and 1 stage 2 project. That's probably the balance we'd expect, in terms of it's still relatively early in the overall process, in the 2 years that the RCF's open for. So lots of groups are currently doing their stage 1s, and then the expectation would be, as feasibility studies are generated from those stage 1 funds, then groups will move on to stage 2 bids. So we've got 2 or 3 that are quite confident at the moment that their stage 1 projects are going to generate sufficiently positive results that it will warrant going on and bidding for a stage 2. And we're still hopeful that, obviously, from our point of view, the more often the stage 1s then end up generating stage 2 applications, the better, because it shows that the projects are coming through, they're strong and viable. So we get a range of technologies in the bids. As I said, that a range of technologies are eligible, and that's but actually, in terms of the bids we receive, there's a wide spread of technologies that they cover. Let's say solar. We've got a number of the projects involve solar elements. We've got 1 project focusing on wind. We've got a few that look at heat networks. We've got 2 that are focusing on anaerobic digestion at the moment. Range of organisations, as I mentioned before, around half parish councils, and then beyond that, we've got a whole range of community energy groups, sports clubs, charities. Groups can work individually or collaboratively. So there we've got a number of projects where a number of local community groups have got together to develop projects. We always ask that one group needs to be the lead group. Obviously, they're the ones who make the bids. They're the one who would handle the transfer of grant and such like. So every project needs a lead organisation. But like I say, we would encourage if groups want to work together. That's we see that as a positive thing. Projects tend to focus on one specific locality, but we have wider geographical focus in certain projects. So generally, projects focus on a village, what's possible within that village. However, we've got a project I'll look in slightly more detail at the next slide. But projects that cover a range of villages, a range of buildings of a similar type. For your case, a range of churches in an area. That's something that we very much encourage. From our point of view, village projects are fantastic. We're really delighted to support them. But there's also a real benefit to models which involve buildings in a slightly larger geographical area. They're more easily replicated, if you like, and also they can be expanded more easily. So from our point of view, and obviously we're conscious, the slide that I showed you before, we work in an area where there isn't many community energy groups, and the community energy groups that do exist generally have done one project and aren't looking to do any more, which slightly limits the growth of the community energy sector in the area. So from our point of view, if projects cover wider area, either wider geography or similar buildings within a geography, that's really positive. And then the last bullet point there is just to say we haven't had any church-led applications in our hub at the moment, but there was a deanery bid supported in the Midlands And in terms of bids that we support, we work really closely with the other energy hubs. There's 5 energy hubs across England, North East, North West, Midlands, South East, South West, and we work very closely with the other hubs. So we're all aware of each other's RCEF projects and aware of the types of projects that are supported. So when one group supports the deanery project, that carries quite a lot of weight if another hub receives a bid from a similar type of organisation. So that's really positive, you know, from our point of view. If a deanery wants to make a bid, that gives us a really positive example to follow. Okay, so just very quickly to finish, just to give you an idea, like I say, we've supported 20 stage 1 projects, and I'm just going to give you a little bit of detail about 3 of them, just to give you a little bit more of like context of the type of organisations that we're talking to, the type of bids we're getting. So first one, Barningham, is a very small village in Richmondshire, just a couple of miles off the A66. They've bid for a project. As I said there, the village itself, a couple of 100 houses, is relying on oil-fired heating. There's a couple of retired engineers in the village who were really keen to look at how the village itself could reduce its carbon footprint. So they've bid into the fund. They've secured £38,000 to look at biomass and solar installations, with additional renewable generation sources. So they're focusing on solar, but they're also having a look at biomass options. There's a lot of land around Barningham. They've got a supportive local landlord who's got extensive land ownership, so he's on board with the project, and really they're using those assets, the land, some of the farm buildings, to see how can these be used to generate electricity, and use that to set up the community energy grid. Second example, Rydale Village Halls. So that's an example where say 29 village halls have been involved in a project throughout Rydale. So this is a project that's not village based, it's got a wider geography. And the group's really, so there was lots of village halls wanting to look at ways to save costs and to reduce their carbon footprint. On an individual basis, they wouldn't have been able to bid into the RCEF funds. So what they've done is they've joined forces, and they're looking at whether there's ways that working together could benefit all the village halls through potential bulk buying options. They're also looking at battery storage as part of their project, and some of them have some land around the village halls, so some of them are looking at heat pumps, ground source heating. So like I say, individually, these village halls wouldn't have been able to bid into the fund, but they're grouping together and they're looking at more imaginative solutions rather than just putting solar panels on the buildings, and that's been supported, and we see that as a really positive project. And probably this is the project I think that might most closely mirror the approach that the church might take in bidding into the fund. And finally, a project that we've just recently supported, Monk Fryston and Hillam community buildings. These are villages so between Leeds and Selby, but east of Leeds, and just an active community. They've never been involved in community energy before, but they have been involved in projects to extend their community hall, and various environmental projects around the village. So an active group, and they're working with the local community centre, primary school, church, and cricket and football clubs. So they've got a range of organisations in the village, and they're looking at solutions together. And I say again, the technologies keep coming up: solar, ground and air source heat pumps, and battery storage. Again, are the main technologies that they're focusing on. So hopefully that gives you a bit of an idea of the type of projects that have been supported. So, and obviously, hopefully you'll be able to relate those to some of the ideas that you've talked about yourselves. So if I can pass back to yourself, Jemima, that's the end of the presentation. So yeah, any questions? Any questions?